Hello and welcome to Analog Insights. In today's episode, I review a remarkable 50mm f.95 lens from the Shenzhen-based company TTArtisan. TTArtisan was only founded in 2019, and with this lens they are obviously taking on the most established and traditional player in the room, and that is Leica, with their legendary Leica Noctilux 50mm f.95 lens. And while an original Noctilux, bought new of course, would set you back €12,000, this particular lens here comes in around €700. And the big question is, of course, is it worth it? I took the lens with me to Hong Kong. I found that suitable because Shenzhen is basically just around the corner, and wanted to explore the city through that particular lens, shooting some street shots, landscapes, architecture, and also a couple of portraits of a friend on Ilford Delta 100 and Kodak ProImage 100. As always, let's take a closer look at this particular lens, the handling, the optical design, and most importantly, its performance. The TTArtisan 50mm f.95 lens is cosmetically very similar to the original Leica Noctilux. The lens comes in a similar size, and also the inscriptions and the font chosen for the inscriptions are a clear nod in Leica's direction. The TTArtisan comes in silver and titanium, and coincidentally Leica just introduced a titanium version of the Noctilux, limited to 100 pieces, and of course coming at a premium price tag. And in contrast, the TTArtisans of course both cost the same, so you can really choose which direction you prefer. And it is important to note that this is an all-metal construction, this lens, and weighs pretty hefty, 690 grams. A closer look at the optical design also reveals where all this weight comes from. It's an 11 elements in 8 groups design, with one two-sided or double-sided spherical lens, 2 dispersive lenses, and 8 high index lenses, and a total of 14 aperture blades let you close down the lens in half stops all the way to the minimum of f16, or of course open it up to the legendary wide open f.95. In contrast to the Leica Noctilux, the TTArtisan offers a marked extra stop at f1.1. Here the Leica only features the f.95 and then again f1.4, and here the TTArtisan has this additional stop in between, which kind of makes sense because of course this is the area that you're bound to use this lens a lot. The lens is naturally a manual focus lens, and has a minimum focusing distance of 0.7 meters, so the common standard, and the filter size is 67 millimeters. It comes with a box, a warranty card, rear cap, a metal front cap, instruction manual, and a little screwdriver to calibrate the focusing of the lens if necessary. So quite a package for the €700 that you're paying. But the big question now is, how does it perform and handle? So what about the performance and the results? When shot wide open, the lens creates the soft and dreamlike look that you would expect from such a lens. And yet it is surprisingly sharp, especially in the center of the frame, even when shot wide open. And of course, this significantly improves once you stop down to f1.4 or f2. And I would say in terms of sharpness, the sweet spot is really at f5.6. In general, of course, such a lens is well suited for a clear subject separation and making certain elements in the image stand out, and this mostly worked out pretty well. You only have with a rangefinder that effect, of course, that if you have an element in your frame that is not in the center and you need to focus on it first and then recompose your shot, that of course the distance to that subject changes potentially. And especially when shooting such a lens wide open, this effect of course becomes more pronounced, and it might happen to you that your subject that you intend to be in focus ends up being slightly out of focus. And this happened to me occasionally at least. When shot wide open, the lens also shows some strong vignetting and fall off towards the corners. Again, a common effect that again significantly improved once you stop down. Already at f1.4, but then significantly at f2 and beyond. And as I've already indicated, sharpness also increases along with that, and also the resolution becomes higher, so you get really, really nice results at f5.6, and still really beautiful ones at f2 or so. So it's really usable in that whole range. When shot against the light without a hood, there was only some slight flaring and ghosting, but I saw surprisingly few such effects. I was personally blown away by this one portrait that I took of a friend here at dusk at f.95, and you can see how sharp her eyes are and how beautiful the transition to the background is, and also the bokeh effects here in the background of these light sources. Personally, I feel like this image really showcases the power of this particular lens nicely. I was able to shoot ISO 100 film basically at dusk, and where there was not a lot of light available, and yet you can really see it was possible to get it in focus and get out some really, really nice colors. Speaking of color, the color representation is really good of this particular lens, and to me, I also appreciated this modern rendering, and I really find that this lens is particularly well suited for isolating a certain subject and drawing people into the frame, especially when you shoot at f2 or wider open. So, for example, this menu here or the matcha dessert are good examples of what I mean. And in those cases, at least I personally don't mind the vignettes so much. And of course, if you shoot a landscape wide open, then of course they are very, very apparent. But in other situations and also darker situations, of course, you don't mind the vignettes, or they might even come in handy. As you know, I tend to shoot some straighter compositions, which sometimes are a little bit boring, but of course they have the benefit, if you're testing a lens, that you can also notice some slighter distortions. And in this particular case, as you can see here, my summary was that this lens is really well corrected and lives up to the advanced and pretty complex lens design that it promises to have, and I only found some very slight distortions that here and there a line is a little bit curved, but nothing that is really strong or particularly apparent. In general, I feel like the engineers put quite some effort into creating a lens that would perform well across all the different f-stops, and to me, what stands out with this lens is the versatility. As you could see in Hong Kong, I tried to take it out on a hike and downtown and shoot architecture or details, and in darker situations, lighter situations, shoot some portraits and all that. And I feel like what really stands out to me is the versatility of this lens, and that you can use it for so many different purposes. And it worked surprisingly well for this particular use case of exploring a city with fresh eyes. And having all these different situations. I really, really like that, and the optical performance was really good across the entire f-stop range. So what about the handling and my personal impressions? Most importantly, this is a pretty heavy lens, and carrying it around my neck all day long was a little bit tough, to be honest. So my personal takeaway was this is not a always-on lens that you would typically carry around all day long. You shouldn't be doing that. For that, you have a 50mm Summicron and f2 that is perfectly suitable for most situations. For me, this lens here is more of a specialty lens that you would bring out when shooting a portrait session or having a particular use case with darker situations and so on. Then I think this lens really shines for carrying it around all day long, especially around your neck. It's not ideal. I would typically put it back in my bag, but the kind of photography that I do requires me to just keep it around my neck and then be ready as quickly as possible. So for me, this was kind of a downside. The focus throw is slightly longer than on other lenses, which also makes sense because it allows you to focus very precisely, which of course with such a widest open maximum aperture is also required. And many people might benefit from using it with a 1.5 magnification lens on top of the viewfinder to get it an even more precise view on the rangefinder patch. So this might be useful when shooting this particular lens. And the build quality is just excellent, I would say, hands down. I was really impressed by the kind of quality this lens has, the high value that you can feel in the aperture clicks and the sound that it creates, and also how the focusing feels and so on. So a really nice lens that feels machined to the highest standards. The only thing that I didn't like so much was that on the metal lens cap, which is also remarkable that it is a metal lens cap, is the logo on top there. It's a personal preference, but I didn't like that so much. I found it very easy to work with the lens despite the additional size and weight that it has, and also felt like all the additional aperture stops, of course, creates quite some versatility in how you can use it. And yet it is clearly designed for that use case of shooting it wide open or at around f1.1, f1.4 and so on. And here it really shines, in my opinion, and it's a lens that is well suited for that. And it also enables you to be more versatile if you're stuck with a certain ISO film and you cannot change just yet. This lens gives you the kind of extra stops that you sometimes need. And at least in my case, I only shot ISO 100 films from morning to evening and never encountered any problem. So it really got me that extra stop of light whenever I needed it. And also got the right results with it. I got very good and interesting results overall, as you can see, across the entire range of apertures. And I particularly like the dreamy look that you can create from an artistic perspective, especially for portraits. And as I've already said, this lens is naturally made for the widest opens apertures. And I feel like it's rather complementing my lens collection. And I feel like if I would only buy one 50mm lens, this would not be it. But already having a 50mm f2 or even an f1.5 or f1.4, it is still an interesting addition to the lens collection then, because it opens up extra stops and has a different kind of dreamy look that you can create with it. Visually, I didn't like so much the additional DJ optical that it has here on the front of the lens. Personally, I think it's a little bit confusing from a consumer perspective. Why is there an additional brand name or name there? I would just expect TTArtisan, the focal length, the aperture, and the serial number, and that's it. But of course, again, a minor detail. And what I really like is the font and how the f-stops and everything is inscribed in the lens. This felt really nice and high value to me. And while it is obviously taken or copied a little bit from Leica, I feel like the lens retains its own soul here and has a right to exist in its own. In my case, I didn't have to calibrate the focus on this lens, so I didn't have to use the little screwdriver that it came with. I just took a first test roll, testing the focus wide open in particular, and quickly realized, okay, it's working perfectly fine. And I didn't encounter any problems. Only towards infinity I was sometimes unsure, is the lens already at infinity, or does it need more? But that's it. Other than that, I didn't encounter any problems. On the positive side, I really like the silver version of this lens, and also feel like it looks particularly nice on such a black Leica M body. And I got a lot of compliments for the look of this particular lens from friends and fellow photographers, and there were many photographers also in Hong Kong turning their heads and looking at the lens when passing me by. You can really see that it drew people's attention, because they were probably wondering, okay, is that the real like a Noctilux, or is that like one of the famous Canons or Folklander or other alternatives out there? And yeah, it's also a nice conversation starter, if you know what I mean. It's a really interesting lens, and especially the silver version, I found that it has a really nice touch on the black Leica M body. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Analog Insights and my review of the 50mm f.95 TTArtisan M mount lens. From my perspective, it's a viable alternative to the legendary and significantly more expensive Leica M Noctilux. Of course, it is not a Noctilux, it doesn't perform the same, but it also doesn't cost the same. So if you don't want to break the bank and still get a very interesting, characteristic, dreamy, soft look when shot wide open, this is definitely worth taking a look at. And especially if you prefer shooting certain portraits, or prefer shooting in a lot of low light, darker situations, then it is an interesting lens, and it might be interesting as an addition to your lens collection. If you're looking for a small, compact, always-on 50mm lens, this one is not the way to go. It is a heavy beast. It blocks quite some part of your viewfinder, but it has a soul and a right to exist on its own, and you get quite a bit for the €700 that TTArtisan is asking for. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please remember to like it and maybe even share it with your friends. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. Jules, Greg, and I really appreciate each and every subscriber coming our way. So thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.